He is Chairman Emeritus of PwC Philippines, a role he's held since July 2021, following his 2 consecutive terms as chairman and senior partner at the firm. He is now chairman of the Justice Reform Initiative, a private sector umbrella group in the Philippines advocating for reforms in the administration of justice. With us now on Thought Leaders, please welcome Attorney Alexander Cabrera. Good to have you with us. Alex, welcome to the program.
Yeah, thank you, Cathy, for having me in the program. Good morning to you and to all our viewers.
Well, tell us more about the Justice Reform Initiative and where you and your group are coming from in light of the governance challenges the Philippines faces.
Yeah, the Justice Reform Initiative is actually an umbrella organization, the Makati Business Club, Management Association of Philippines, and the Institute of Corporate Directors, and other institutions are also members of the JRI. The purpose of JRI is really to promote integrity in the judicial system and to improve the efficiency in the dispensation of justice.
So, in light of the governance challenges we now face with the flood control scam, what are you now proposing under Justice Reform Initiative, along with the business sector?
Yeah. Well, the Justice Reform Initiative used to be called Judicial Reform Initiative, advocating for reforms in the judiciary. And then it became a Justice Reform Initiative to have more an expanded scope, not only in the judiciary but also in other agencies of the government. But nowadays, I think to be more relevant, it should be read as Justice Through Reform Initiative, because you really cannot have justice without reform in our vital government agencies and the rest of the stakeholders of government. This corruption issue is very difficult. It doesn't have a silver bullet. And if JRI is to succeed in its purpose, JRI should be a catalyst in coming up with a comprehensive plan, a comprehensive strategy to battle the systemic corruption in our country.
So, if that's the case, it's a massive undertaking. What is Justice Reform Initiative proposing then?
Well, it's going to be in the works, Cathy. We have our anniversary coming up. JRI celebrating its 10th year anniversary. We're celebrating that sometime November 21, I think. But there are many components of this. Of course, I would say look at the laws, and we still haven't passed the anti-dynasty law, for instance. And as I speak now, maybe there are about less than 30 bills in Congress, about 23 in the Senate, all on anti-dynasty. Nothing moved there. And if Congress is not willing to move because it is prejudicial to the interests of the members who come from dynasties, then maybe we need a people's initiative. And the people's initiative is another way to pass this kind of legislation. Of course, it's very difficult. It will require 12% of the electorate, 3% coming from districts. But if we do this, even if we don't succeed, we will be able to ventilate the issues. We need to look at the power of the president to pardon, because it does really embolden corruption. Like Joseph Estrada was pardoned by Gloria Arroyo, and he was guilty of plunder, found to be guilty of plunder, and yet he was pardoned, if I can give an example. So there's always an out, for even for the callously corrupt, there's always an out. But I think we should also look at what our neighbors are doing, the successful ones. For example, in Hong Kong, they have this independent commission against corruption. It is very successful, eradicated almost completely the corruption in Hong Kong. Of course, there still is some minimal corruption going on there. But Hong Kong has it, Singapore has it since the 1950s when they were starting. South Korea has it, and South Korea was able to convict and jail, two of its past leaders. There are many countries that have an anti-corruption agency. The Philippines doesn't have it. And to be fair, we have the ombudsman. It is a specialized prosecutor, investigator, and prosecutor on um, corruption-related cases. We have the special court, the Sandigang Bayan, that prosecutes these corruption cases. Rather hears and decides on these corruption cases against government officials and private individuals involved. But we know that's not enough because it's really difficult. And if I may say so, Cathy, the difficulty is that the ombudsman is supposed to be independent. And if we look at the performance of the ombudsman in the past, maybe ups and downs. But one thing is quite obvious: it's independent but beholden at the same time.
Independent but beholden.
Beholden to the president.
So with the newly installed Boying Rimulya
I hope he will
as
not
ombudsman,
be. I hope he will not
how
be
will
beholden.
he not be? What would be the guidance of the Justice Reform Initiative then?
It's a difficult question, but in large part, I think it will have to be personal. If you are indeed, at that part of your life, that you just want to do good, then a personal decision must be taken, and you must do your job for the people, for the country, for posterity, and because this is the problem. If we're not able to convict the decision makers, nothing will happen with our corruption issues. You don't really get to the top people if those kinds of investigations are controlled by the top people. If you're beholden to them, if you stop at a certain level, and that is really very very difficult because the power is the president to appoint, and the appointee needs to think independently and bravely. There are many things that we should do. Um, Corruption is a tango between the public sector and the private sector. In a tango, there's a dance, and there will be no dance if there's no partner. So even that is a very difficult issue because the private sector is on the other side of that tango. And if we cannot control the government, we must control the private sector, at least really discourage the private sector from participating. And I think this mentality needs to be enforced on everyone. There must be a change in mindset, about becoming successful or striving to be successful, but at the same time, without sacrificing integrity.
Are you finding that there are supporters from the private sector with that kind of a mindset, given that if they want to be sustainable, then they've got to do good?
Yeah, there are a lot. There's a lot of support from the private sector in terms of conducting their business with integrity. In fact, even if you look at the tax agencies, and maybe people will misunderstand me about my next statement, but even dealing, for instance, with the tax agencies like the Bureau of Internal Revenue, you can do it totally above board. And people don't believe that it can be done above board, but we've always done it above board. For example, that's our practice. And in the more than 100 years of existence of the firm, PwC, we've never dealt in any other way with government agencies except above board. So it can be done. It can be done really, but you have to really exercise work ethics. Your work ethics must be very high. because you need to fight it out. You need to cite the legal basis. You need to reach the other person and tell them, look, we're trying to pay our taxes, but we don't want to pay more than what is provided in the law. And it's going to be a back and forth, but that's where your work ethics will come in. So you asked me about whether there's support in the private sector. Yes. Can it be done in the even in the tax collection agencies? The answer again is yes. It can be done.
But you say there is no silver bullet, and when you overlay that issue of corruption on all sides, if you're, for instance, the CEO of a firm, how do you attack the problem? Because there's no one surefire solution.
Well,
It raises the risk of, again, the risk of doing business in the Philippines.
the most difficult part I would say about solving it is when it involves the small enterprises. Because when you're a small enterprise, you want all your resources to go into the business, right? And you know, maybe it's still the tax regime that needs to be changed so that they can afford it more. But the way that our system is laid out, it's anti-poor actually,
How
because
so?
it's anti-poor because if you're a small business and the BR issues an assessment and BR just sustains that assessment, and you will need judicial intervention in order to overcome that assessment. You pay 1% of the filing fees. And recently, the BR wanted even for you to, they wanted to proceed with the collection even when you're in court. So um, the Court of Tax Appeals imposes a bond to be made by the taxpayer when they're appealing, and the bond is expensive, and you have your lawyer's fees, etc. And, and so this access to justice, for a small enterprise is really costly. Add to that the sleepless nights and the emotional stress. So how would you go out of it? See, this is very difficult, but I think if you decide that you're going to do business only one way, then it's easier for you to tread the right path because you don't need to turn over a new leaf. What's difficult, Kathy, is that if you've been practicing one way and then you wanted to change, it's very difficult because you've already done it, and the people that you've dealt with, they're going to expect something like that year on year.
So how do you break that cycle then? If
Turnover.
indeed you're faced with massive corruption allegations like this, could it be a turning point?
These massive things about that's coming out on corruption, they have two effects. One, as we've seen with the CTA deal before, when that came out, you know, some people in government, felt, what they're doing is peanuts, and sometimes it emboldens them actually to, to go for a higher amount. Um, but also, when you have things like this, people get fed up. And before this scandal with the flood control projects came out, the people were not sufficiently enraged. The people were not sufficiently outraged. When they saw that, they were outraged. But Filipinos are really kind. And I'm not saying copy the violence in Indonesia or copy the violence in Nepal. I'm not saying that at all. But I'm telling you, Indonesia is about the housing allowance of the congressman. And Nepal ranks higher compared to us in terms of the corruption index. I mean, they're doing better on corruption. We're much lower down the scale compared to Nepal. And yet, people in Indonesia, people in Nepal, they're no longer having it. Um, they're fed up with it, and I think the Philippines will go the same way. Hopefully, not the violent way, but about being fed up. Being fed up is colorless. It's not about any political party. It's about everybody, whether you're paying taxes or not. Sure, the people paying taxes, it would seem they suffer the most, right? Because they're the ones paying, and those below, it's either you're exempt if you're minimum wage, and depending on the amount of your income, you will not be paying any tax. And there are many underground economies as well not paying tax, and maybe that's part of the reason why people think, uh, I don't pay tax anyway, so even if they steal that, I have no stake in that. I paid nothing there, so they're not really stealing anything from me. I don't pay my tax, and I even have ayuda. So what's my interest about complaining about corruption? Wrong. Because the health system, the welfare, the education, the other social services that the Filipinos deserve, that's all gone. And we're not talking peanuts here. Um, if you remember this case in Malaysia, where the Najib, the prime minister there, diverted to his personal bank account the funds from the state investment company,
IMDb.
yeah, the IMDb. That's like 700 million US dollars. And the US said this is the incomparable, the worst kind of corruption that they've seen. $700 million, 40 billion pesos. And how much is the unprogrammed appropriations? More than 500 million. How much are the congressional insertions? More than 300 million. And these are the things which are vague. There are actual projects, and there will still be corruption in the actual projects. How much are we really losing from corruption? And that is why, you said, how do we solve this? I'd use um, 3 A's. Number one, awareness. We should bring the facts to the people. Your job as a journalist is very important, but we should bring the facts to the people to weaken the lies, because people has gotten very good um, about lying. They believe in their own lies, and they think that the people believe them when they lie. It's all political. They're just trying to destroy our good name. Bring the facts to them. And number two, second A, advocate. We should advocate for integrity. We should advocate for enforcement of our laws. We should advocate for people to get jailed. We should call them out. We should advocate. Third is action. Don't just be aware, don't just advocate, be part of the action. We should all be part of this activism, because activism shows the outrage of our people. And without this outrage, no one will change. They will have a free day. Uh, just corruption has become a soft word. That's stealing. That's unabated stealing. We have crooks in government. We elected crooks in government, and they're stealing. They're not into service. They're into stealing, and they think it's glorified if you call it corrupt. It's downright stealing, and there are many crimes violated. And I think, Cathy, all these people are individuals. I think the way to reach them is include their families. The AMLA, the family members' accounts can be frozen. It's up to them to prove that it's not part of that crime. Even the children, the Nepo kids, they can be criminally liable, because anyone who profits from a crime, especially if they know it, is part of the crime, is an accessory to the crime, and they can also be criminally liable. I think this kind of approach should be done. And we just have to be, you know, be more intense in our activism insofar as we're concerned. And I hope that activism also includes electing the right leader in the next elections.
Given what we know now and how the leadership is acting and reacting, how would you assess from the perspective of the Justice Reform Initiative in how this can be resolved and how to get justice back to the
We
people?
are really hopeful that this will be resolved on the level that all the people involved will be prosecuted and they will go to jail. We're really hoping that. But action speaks louder than words. You know, if you say that no one is above the law, then let it be. Then no one should be above the law. And I think it's not about JRI. It's about everybody watching this. It's about the communities and the citizens watching this. They are actually on trial now because if anything comes out of this investigation of the ICI, for instance, and only the middle people or the lower people get punished, then you know that corruption is still there. You know that it's the old way, that only the small fishes, gets punished, but the big fishes, the masterminds, the big accomplices, um, they will be emboldened to do it again. And if not them, then their relatives, the next ones in this succession that is violative of the Constitution but unenforced by law. Um, you know, Cathy, maybe I'd like to say something about this budget insertions. Because I remember in 2013, you remember the PDAF, the pork barrel funds, took many names, became Community Development Fund before it became a priority um, priority development assistance fund, and that's the Napoles scam, right? But I think one thing that we did not learn, from that PDAP Supreme Court decision, one of the shining moments of the Supreme Court was when the Supreme Court said that these kinds of funds that doesn't mention the specific projects and the specific amounts for these projects, they are unconstitutional. These kinds of projects that congressmen implements and executes, they are unconstitutional because all the execution part authority, the authority for that is with the executive, and the legislature approves the budget, the through the General Appropriations Act. They cannot approve the budget if it doesn't satisfy these two very important things, the specific amounts and the specific projects. Why? Because you will give that authority, to whoever is executing it, and that should be the appropriation. That is the act that should be passed by Congress, so that the executive will only implement, adding some details to it, but at least they're guided by that. But what's happening now, when congressmen are involved again, and whether it's called um, special unprogrammed appropriation or insertion, whatever it's called now, whenever they get involved, they are performing the job of the executive. They're legislatures. So whenever they get involved in any project, when their approval is required before funds are released, those are the telltale signs that they are involved. And this is so unconstitutional. And now they're saying about the 2026 budget, it's still there. There's still funds for unprogrammed activities, and that is unconstitutional based on the PDAF ruling of the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court rulings are part of the laws of the land. You don't follow that, you're violating the law. Who's going to make them account? And that's very difficult because everybody is in on it, right?
As you say, it was a shining moment in 2013 for the Supreme Court when it decided that the PDAF would be declared unconstitutional. How can it get ahead now of what's going on and seeing a repetition in a different name of what appears to be unconstitutional?
Well, firstly, anything in the budget that doesn't specify what it's for is unconstitutional. You can add there these intelligence funds. Truth be told, there is really an intelligence fund. In the administrative code of the Philippines, that's allowed, but it still needs to be audited by the COA, right? And there's only one use for confidential funds or intelligence funds: security. Only for security. So if you're the Secretary of Education and you have confidential funds, what's that for? Are you really trying to avoid NPAs from studying? That's an improper use of intelligence fund. There are many telltale signs, every time that it's not mentioned there. Special purpose, unappropriated, insertions, whatever.
In other words, you're saying if somebody sees something's not right, think about filing something with the Supreme Court.
Indeed. Let's file a case on that. And it is going to be our hope that the Supreme Court will rise above the politics of it all and just decide it on the basis of law.
But there have been issues in terms of the perception people have of the Supreme Court with the junking of the impeachment case against Vice President Sara Duterte. How do we go from here then, given that it's raised both praise as well as criticism on the independence in the way that the Supreme Court's decided on that case?
I think insofar as the Supreme Court is concerned, all throughout history, I think it's ups and downs also, and there are more ups, I'd like to believe, than the downs. But this recent decision of the Supreme Court, as based on the JRI statement joined in by the Makati Business Club and the Management Association of the Philippines, I think this is really a hiccup. This is an important hiccup. The Supreme Court chose to protect the privacy of a government official, but the impeachment, as provided in the Constitution, is meant to protect the people. And without going through the impeachment process, all these things will not come out. They will remain hidden, whatever those violations are. They will remain hidden. And there's sufficient due process there, even for the official that's being impeached. If they're being impeached through the Congress, there's the Committee on Justice that will hear the case. And if it's forwarded to the Senate, then the Senate trial will be the due process. You cannot achieve due process at the complaint side. Like for instance, Cathy, if someone sues you, you can say, there's no due process here, I'm sued. No, you cannot ask for due process, I'm complaining. You ask for due process in the preliminary investigation in court, you cannot ask due process from me, I'm complaining. You see, and that is what's happening. It's like the Supreme Court saying there's no process in the due process in that complaint. And there are many technical aspects there, but for us, it's not one of the Supreme Court's shining moment. But guess what, Cathy? We're not giving up on the Supreme Court. It is the only thing we have. some countries, even if they're so appear so messed up, there's
Such
check
as
and balance.
which country?
U.S.
Okay, we didn't have to look very far. How come?
check and balance. There's check and balance. Whatever is the excess on the executive will be checked by the Supreme Court. And because their justice system works, there's check and balance. We want that because our Supreme Court is our only hope. When things fall apart, we really need the Supreme Court to take up the cudgels and hold the torch of justice, for all of us. Without the Supreme Court, there will be no democracy. And again, we should appeal to the individual justices, their conscience, almost begging for mercy here. Please be the torch for all of us. That is our wish for the Supreme Court.
It's an important hiccup, as you mentioned earlier. How do you think that will figure now into what it needs to do to resolve what cannot be a silver bullet in the flood control issue and corruption as a culture?
If the Supreme Court does its job well, if the judiciary does its job well, then there will be hope. But I will not mix words. With this corruption issue, if it becomes political, if despite the facts, people are not convicted, are not punished, then it's really going to go down the drain. Because I think an important component of democracy is consequence. Yes, you have the freedom. Yes, you can be elected, but there's public accountability. And there must be consequence attached to that public accountability. It's not a position of power. It's a position of service, a position of being accountable to the public, regardless of whatever branch of agency you belong. Executive, legislative, judiciary, you're all accountable to the public.
We've spoken about the judicial courts and also the ombudsman. What about Sandigan Bayan? Because that serves like the third leg in the full ecosystem in the judiciary. What role will it have and it should have in the ongoing investigations?
We expect the Sandigan Bayan to resolve this judiciously, all the cases before it. But the thing, Cathy, I don't think it's Sandigan Bayan. I think it's completing an investigation and filing the case, going through with the case, so that something can be heard there. And yeah, I think Sandigan Bayan can do its job well, provided that the rest of the ecosystem, the ombudsman, the witnesses also come up and participate in curbing this corruption issue.
It does, and it requires a lot of coordination with the ICI because it is who is conducting the investigations, wanting not only to investigate, prosecute, but recover. So there's that third leg that also needs to be considered, and it wants to do it as the fastest time possible. Is it at all possible?
I don't really know because and this has been pointed out in fact by one of your guests, Mr. Ramon de Rosario, that ICI should have greater powers than it has. It must not only be investigating, it must have some enforcement function, but regardless, I think what is very important here is who is ICI reporting to. And I think if you take a model, for instance, like Hong Kong, they're reporting to the chief executive of Hong Kong, the president equivalent. And even if they're reporting to the chief executive, things get done. People get punished. The corrupt is found out, and that's why it works. But if you're always under maximum control of the person that you're reporting to, there's no independence, then it's going to be a farce.
Could there be independence then? Because the
Of
ICI
course,
would be reporting
of
to
the ICI,
the highest
yes,
leader of the land,
yeah.
the president.
This is, Kathy, this is where it will get difficult. At the very least, regardless of what happens, the public should know. What the ICI finds out, the public should know. And whether it's acted upon by the president or by our ombudsman is secondary. The public should know so that there will be pressure for prosecution and doing the right thing.
So should the proceedings be live streamed for the ICI? Because there are two trains of thought here. It might compromise the investigation, but at the same time, it might keep away the things that people might have to know and should know in real time.
Yeah, we're always for transparency, and if you will ask us, it's better that we know, versus getting the edited version. So, I think for me, there's no um, argument there that the more. I mean, these things have been kept away from us for so long, and now we have a golden opportunity, and now there will be um, um, an independent commission. Why can't it be transparent?
Why do you think that is? How would you answer your own question?
I'd like to I'd like to respect uh, what the ICI has said. That's to preserve the integrity of the investigation. But if it's just a question of style, I think the um, investigation can still be based on meritocracy, can be based on evidence. You know, Even if it is transparent, at least the people will know. And if some evidence is not considered, then the people will know. Oh, okay, we're not we're not too judgmental in that sense, right? But if it's hidden from us, that's where the outrage you know, emanates.
And also the loss and opportunity. If you speak about the corporate ecosystem itself, you said that they're doing a good job. There are those who comply and can comply with good governance standards, but put up against the backdrop of everything else corrupt, how can they now do business in an environment where good business isn't really supported as of now?
The big corporations, especially the listed ones, they have the so-called file a so-called sustainability report, and it's based on the matrix of ESG, um, environment, social, and governance. Um, and those are the matrix for sustainability. Um, you have an obligation to all your stakeholders, um, and you cannot do business only when the environment is easy. You do business even when the environment is hard, and it is what builds up the brand of these companies. Going through it, sticking to your principles, sticking to your values, because you know that in the long term, that is what will really build the value of the brand, and that is what will really be beneficial to the rest of your stakeholders in your ecosystem.
You've just been appointed chair of the Institute for Solidarity Asia. That's a group that advocates for governance scorecards. How then can you take that governance scorecard to maybe the local government units, that side of the government where we need to write up so that we can make a change from ground up?
Good question, Kathy. So there are local governments um, that would be cooperative or that would want to participate in a governance scorecard. And there will be some local governments who would not want to participate. So I think we should work with those local governments that want to participate and make them as good examples, so that they'll be the benchmark, for the rest of these local governments.
As a final point, I wanted to go back to your mention of the anti-dynasty bills. I didn't realize there were over 2 dozens already filed and none yet passed. With what's gone on and the gravity at which we're facing right now with all the corruption allegations in government, Do you think that that's going to move? Or is there any effort from any of those who filed or those who might be willing to support it to proceed?
So
Proceed with certainty on passing it?
So, Kathy, insofar as that is concerned, I'm not optimistic that that's going to happen in Congress. Um, e-
Not
e-
even
e-
after what's happened or what's happening?
even after what happened, not that optimistic. I'm not saying it will not happen. I'm saying the probability of that happening, um, not too optimistic until we see, other signs, because uh, that was compounded actually by the exploitation of the party list system, right? And even the seasoned politicians and those with very high wealth individuals, um, they run under the party list system when that is supposed to be for the marginalized and the underprivileged. So where's the actual representation now? So I mean, people in Congress, they're not only they they're not only unsatisfied about their freedom now to violate the principle of the Constitution on anti-dynasty. They still need to adapt to that by running under the party list system. So I think one step at a time, we cure the party list system, we cure the anti-dynasty bill. But as I said, Kathy, because my confidence there is not so high, I think we should go for a people's initiative. And people might dismiss it as, that's not gonna happen. That's too difficult. We know it's difficult, but at the very least, see the awareness. It's gonna drive awareness. See the advocacy. It's gonna drive the advocacy. And if we actually do it, then we're acting on it. Then we're not complicit by omission.
So typically that'll come from the people, or is it from the leadership at the top to
No,
call for a people's initiative?
from the people, from the ground up. That was the design of the Constitution.
And the consequence being that there is the national election coming up in 3 years. And change needs to happen. And as you say, you didn't want to see the same names that have come up and have prospered at this point in time when there's a lot of corruption allegations. How then do we prepare for that 3 years on?
Yeah. Start now, as early as now, on awareness. Spread the facts. Counter the lies. Advocate now for a change of mindset. Advocate for not being fanatics. Advocate against fanaticism. Like, we support our leader, right or wrong. That has no place in an intelligent society. Everyone should be accountable, objectively, based on merits. Fanaticism should go. That fans club, should go. And everyone should use their brain, their heart, think about their children, think about the future of this country when they make that decision. Advocate for that, and most importantly, act. Always act. Don't talk and not do anything. We have to act. The 3 A's, I think, will lead us to the right decision come the February 20th elections.
It's a clarion call for all, not only for the justice system. I thank you so much for the insights, Alex. I much appreciate it.
Cathy.
Alex Cabrera there of PwC. Catch us again next Thursday, 9 p.m. Philippine Standard Time on One News. You can also check out the long conversation on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and Google Podcasts. And if you haven't done so, like or follow my social media pages. I'm Cathy Yang. This is Thought Leaders.